Hey everybody, this is Andy Schauer here. I'm starting to record my first video. I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you and learning how to help you guys out with any estate planning needs you might have. So, as I said, my name's Andy Schauer. I'm a partner of Schauer Law Group, LLP. I have primarily been an entertainment lawyer over the course of my career. My partner, Ilana Schauer, has primarily been a family law attorney over the course of her career, but we opened Schauer Law Group together once we realized that, in fact, we were both doing estate planning things for our entertainment and family law clients. So we've been learning over the last several years a lot of what goes into a comprehensive estate plan and what goes into servicing clients who need an estate plan. So I'm here to tell you more or less exactly what's going on with estate plans, what they are, what the real world implications of them happen to be, and hopefully to dispel some of the scary, intimidating parts of it that you guys may be worried about or struggling with already. So, without much further ado, let's just jump right in. So, a comprehensive estate plan has three main parts. Number one is the will. The last will and testament is how you may have seen it phrased elsewhere, like in movies or TV. But essentially, what it says to do is what to do when you die. And hopefully, when you die, which will hopefully be for a long time off from now, but we're already off to a grammatically interesting start here. But what happens when you die? I don't know, spiritually. That's not what we're here for. We're just here to talk about this stuff. And the assets, actually, is the word we should be using here, and the debts. That's sort of the main thing that your will is concerned with disposing of. Dispose is a technical term. Not that we're going to be shoveling all of your stuff into an incinerator or the garbage bin, but it's just what happens to the what's called the residue of your estate. And your estate is the physical remains of you after your spirit has moved on. And so when you think of an estate, you could think of an estate sale, for example, where people, after they've passed or perhaps they're just moving, they have put all their stuff out in their home. The home itself is often for sale, and then all the knickknacks and furniture and flatware and silverware and everything inside of it is as well. And so that sort of gives you a general view from 10,000 feet of what estate means when we actually use that word estate. So a will deals with, as I mentioned, the residue of the estate. And so what that means is anything that is left over. So if your house hasn't been sold or transferred to another person or to a trust, which we'll talk about in a second, then you still have that as part of your estate. And so what the will does is directs a person called the executor what to do with the leftover stuff. And before I go any further, I should also mention at this point that we're not just talking about your assets, but your debts as well. So if you have money that you still owe to the IRS, to credit cards, on your mortgage, on your vehicle, any of those things, those debts all still need to be handled at the time of your passing as well. So the will talks about what to do first with, usually first is what it talks about, is the assets. And so that's where we're going to start here as well. So if you have a home, for example, and you would like that home to go to your children, how does that happen? Well, if you don't have a will, maybe that's what we should do first, is talk about what happens if you don't have a will. So if you don't have a will, your stuff needs to go through a process called probate. And a lot of people will say a will or a trust, which, again, I'm previewing here a little bit, but if you have a will or a trust, then your estate can avoid probate, and you won't have to go through the probate process. And that's kind of true, but not technically exactly accurate. So one of the things I want to tell you here as part of this video series is what the real deal is with all of these things. I'm not going to say things are how they're not. I'm not going to pull the wool over your eyes or make it sound like something's easier or harder or whatever than it actually is. I want to tell you what the process actually goes down like. And so in that spirit, what we need to first talk about here is the uh, with the wills and with dispersing the assets and the probate process here, kind of what probate looks like in the absence of any estate plan at all. So if you don't have a will, if you don't have a trust, you don't have any of these things, what happens is the probate court comes in for the jurisdiction where you've passed away or where most of your stuff is, and the probate court says, all right, let's take stock of everything. And then the probate court goes through just a whole process to make a big list of everything. And I have not worked, I should say, as a probate court clerk or judge, certainly. So I don't know exactly what the mechanism is, like logistically how it all works. But maybe a cool interview we could do later is to like talk to some of those people and actually talk about that process and what it looks like from their point of view, because I bet that would be pretty cool and interesting. Good idea, Andy. So we'll do that at some point in the future here. But anyway, the probate court, in the absence of any estate plan, has to come in and say, all right, well, what we're going to do here is, there's a house, there are 2 cars, there's a boat. All right, so here are all these things. Now, who's got a claim on these things? Who owes? Does the decedent, the person who's died, hypothetically you in the future, did they have any debts on this? Like, did they have a HELOC, or did they have a mortgage on the home, for example? And so the probate court will look at this, and the probate court will say, all right, well, let's see how much cash they have in their bank account right now. And so a lot of these lenders, they want to just get their money back, and so the probate court will go through the process of paying out just cash to people who are owed cash based on the debts that you have. And then if none of those if those debts are still outstanding, they drain all your bank accounts, they sell all your stocks, and they still can't cover the debts that you have on these assets, then what happens at that point is the assets themselves can be listed for sale. And again, might be part of an estate sale. But that's essentially what the probate court will do, is they'll go through all the stuff that you have, and then they'll go through the debts, and then they'll try and make all of the creditors who were owed money by the estate whole. And that essentially is most of the probate process in a nutshell. Now, if there are any assets left over after that point, then the state will do what's called collecting the estate tax. You may have heard it referred to as the death tax. But the estate tax, the death tax, they're one and the same thing. There's state level and federal level taxes that are assessed when a person transitions life cycles, and that is another drain on the remaining resources of the estate. And then at that point, the court looks at if there's anything left, and then looks at, according to the law, who should be getting things after that. So if you have children or grandchildren, then the state will be like, all right, so if you have, say, 3 children, then whatever's left, a third goes to child A, a third goes to child B, a third goes to child C, and that's how the estate is taken care of at that point. So a lot of times, by the point where you're looking at your children, or who are called your issue, they are an issue, aren't they? But they by the time they get to talking about giving them anything, there's usually not much left if your estate has had to go through the probate process. So the first way we try and get around the probate process is with a will. Now, if you have a will, you go to the probate judge. So again, the probate process, the probate court is still involved at the point where a person passes away, whether or not they have a will or any other part of an estate plan. But if you do have that will, what you will see the court do is look through everything and be like, all right, well, there's an executor for this estate, right? There's somebody that the person who passed away assigned to take care of these things, and that person will do what they need to do. And in practical effect, if all you have as part of your estate plan is a will, essentially the executor will take over the court and the clerk's job in the probate department, and they will handle doing all those steps that I just described. However, the executor has a couple of other things tied into that as well. So number one, you can decide to pay your executor, and that executor gets paid out before like the rest of the estate, the rest of the estate is handed out. So if you have a child that you would like to get paid as an executor for handing out the stuff of your estate, that can be one mechanism to do it. We'll go into a lot more detail with all of these things as we get into specific topics, like specifically talking about the will, specifically talking about trust and all those things. This is just kind of the view from 10,000 feet. But what we will ultimately see is the court goes through this probate process. goes through the executor goes through a similar probate process, but can have little allocations and things like that made. And on top of that, you can put what's called special bequests into your will. So if you have a baby grand piano that one of your children loved to play on, or you have a special other instrument, or a card collection, coin collection, stamp collection, that kind of thing, special pieces of furniture, special artwork, things of that nature, you can say, okay, we're going to take this to the maximum extent possible out of the calculation of the estate, and we're going to give that to somebody. I'm going to give that to my child who I want to have that. We're going to give that to the other child. We're going to give that to the charity that I want to benefit from the residue of my estate, or that sort of thing. And so the executor can then handle those things at a little bit different intervals of the not exactly probate process, but at the post-death process where you're dealing with the assets and debts. That can be one thing the executor does for you. Now, another thing you can put in a will is there are things called pour-over wills, and that means that anything that isn't handled by your trust is going to go into the will directives. And so that's the next thing we need to talk about here is trusts. And what a trust does, trust can really be made to do anything, honestly. And they can exist in all kinds of different forms and permutations. You can have a properly constituted business entity like an S corp or an LLC that essentially acts as the vehicle for the trust, but you don't even need to have that. And you can still have the trust have bank accounts or be a co-signer to your bank accounts, or take possession of your home and take responsibility for your mortgage and things of that nature. And as a practical matter, the trust is basically just you while you're alive, and it's just, you're still going to be responsible for paying those bills, you're still going to be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep and all that of the house. But what happens is, when, as you know, if you've bought or sold a house, you have to pay a transfer tax at the point where you are making that purchase or sale of the house. And if you just have the thing in a trust and the title is held by the trust, you don't need to have a second transfer at that point. So, and the transfer is also based on the property value. So you can lock in that transfer value now, because let's face it, property values are not going to go down. They are not going down anywhere, basically, in America right now. Taxes are going up, inflation's going up, and so right now you can lock in that transfer tax, and then you can just give somebody control of the trust later rather than transferring title to the property, and then you avoid paying another transfer tax. You can just keep it owned by that trust, and everything can keep on going without extra money coming out of your pocket going to the government. So that's one important aspect of trust. That's basically the idea behind it is, if you put your bank accounts, put your real property, put your personal property, put vehicles, put this or that, title those things to the trust, and then that will allow you to avoid paying taxes again on things, and it'll allow for a lot more continuity. And then you can also have your trust be what's called a springing trust. So maybe the trust doesn't do anything during the course of your life, but as soon as you pass away, now this trust springs into action. And the trust says, okay, well, I'm going to pay child A, B, and C X dollars per month as a stipend, because the corpus of the bank account is still owned by the trust. And so those things don't end up going into the will and going through this probate process and being assessed all these taxes and things like that, because the trust doesn't die, just you died. So that's one way to think about how a trust can protect you and protect your family and protect your assets. And then before you die, the last part of a major estate plan is your end-of-life planning and your end-of-life care. So this basically is the process of thinking about and reducing to writing how you want to be treated when you're not in a position really to advocate for yourself anymore. If you happen to have an illness or something like that leads to that kind of passing. Or Alzheimer's or this kind of thing starts to set in, and you lose the ability to advocate for yourself and remember what you wanted and say what you wanted, then you can have an end-of-life care plan that basically outlines, this is how I want to be treated, this is when I want them to pull the plug, this is when I do want certain treatments or when I don't want certain treatments, when I do want certain medications, when I don't want certain medications, do I want a DNR, a do not resuscitate, as part of my end-of-life care plan, and all those sorts of things. And so that it all speaks to how you want to be treated and what you want done with your things, and how you want to live your life while you have it, and what you want done with the the earthly proceeds of that life. So at the end of the day here, what I like to tell people is this should be a peaceful process. I know there's a lot of anxiety associated with it. I know there's a lot of resistance associated with looking at these things. And I got to tell you, there hasn't been a human being yet who's lived a perfect life. And you're not going to be the first one. So what we can do now is plan for it. Make that estate plan. Come to Schauer Law Group. Let us help you. Let us talk you through it. And you'll see. It can be a very calming, therapeutic process. You can feel very good to have that peace of mind that you've done things right and done them to the best of your ability, and we can help you walk through that otherwise very fraught and difficult process. Thanks so much.